mode.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar, New York State Best Practices, Navigating Uncharted Territory Caused by COVID-19. This is the first part of an ongoing webinar series regarding how we, as pupil transportation professionals, can deal with the current COVID-19 situation. Basically, how we can remain fluid in keeping our operation afloat and continuing to provide service to our communities even during this time. Now, I want you to be able to take advantage of the fact that this is an interactive session here. So if you have any questions or concerns as this webinar goes on, please do use the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel to communicate any questions or concerns that you may have with me or any of the panelists that we will have on the line. Now, my name is Andrew Hamilton. I'm the Senior Application Specialist with Transfinder Corporation, and I'll be taking us through the first few steps of today's webinar. But before I do that, I would like to hand things over to David Christopher for a couple of words.
Thank you, Andrew. I want to thank excuse me, all of the attendees today for taking the time out to participate in this webinar. I understand we have over 300 attendees, so that's great. Obviously, you know, there's some important stuff that you're looking to hear. I want a special thanks to the panel members, Paul, Christina, and Kathy, for stepping up to do this. I think that you know, it's very much appreciated that in these difficult times that you help us communicate the information out to the folks, so we're all on the same page. We've seen a lot of examples over the past 2.5 weeks of, you know, transportation professionals stepping up to do, you know, different things than what they're used to doing, correct? You know, delivering meals and delivering learning materials and cleaning, disinfecting buses, etc. And, you know, I've heard from all across the state, from Long Island to Buffalo to, you know, up north to Plattsburgh, from all kinds of people doing some great things. And one thing that Tony keeps asking is, you know, what are the stories? What are the stories? And there's a lot of great stories out there. I will tell you what Transfinder is doing is a great story in terms of helping us communicate and stay connected in these very difficult times when we're kind of all homebound. So, Tony, thank you for this. You and your team have really stepped up and helped the industry. Today, we're going to be presenting some of the latest information from our state partners at SED. And again, thank you, Paul, Christina, and Kathy for taking the time. I'm sure they're going to, you know, when you walk away, you're going to feel a lot better about hearing this information from them versus my emails I send out. Going forward, we hope to provide more of these forums and, you know, as appropriate. We look forward to working with Tony and Transfinder. It's important that you folks communicate to us what kinds of information you need. You're on the front lines, you're doing the hard stuff. We're here to assist you, you know, any way we can. So again, thank you for attending today. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Tony Civitelli, who's made this all happen. Tony?
Thank you for the intro, and again, thank you. I see a lot of names that I recognize, some I don't recognize. Either way, I want to thank you for attending today. Really, this, like we said, is a series of our best practice webinar that's hopefully help us navigate through some of this uncharted territory. Listen, no one asked for this. Nobody did, and we're obviously we got to figure out how to get through these things. And again, some of you guys know my name is Tony Civitelli, President and CEO of Transfinder. And I want to let you know how proud I am for each school, transportation folks out there. I've been hearing all these stories, and really, you are the front line. I mean, I'm watching the president and really even our governor once a day. But you know, there's a lot of people being thanked, but you guys are just as front line as everyone else. You're serving your communities in such unique ways that we never could understand. How really New York is the center of this pandemic. Right, the whole country is looking at what's going on in New York State, and you guys are right in the middle of it, and how much you guys are doing through so much. So I just want to let you know, I want to thank you, and and our thoughts and prayers are with all you guys. So I want you to make sure to please be safe. For the webinar, we got a lot of things for the webinar. We want to go through a lot of things, so I don't want to spend too much time because we want to be interactive at a certain point. But I want to thank New York State Association for Pupil Transportation, and Dave, thank you for what you're doing and being really dedicated to this group and this great state of ours. Again, we keep talking about our backyard. This is where we live, and we want to make sure we're doing our part. And we're building this best practice. We have a page we've been now doing for almost 3 weeks that we're gathering a lot of stories, and we're seeing the meal deliveries. We're seeing these pop-up parades are happening, so that way these kids know that the teachers still they're being missed, and the cards and everything in the news. You guys are all part of this. So again, thank you so much. I know we have tons of things to discuss, and I want to thank our clients are here, and also the ones that are not our clients. It's okay. At this point, we want to be all together. It doesn't matter what you're using. We want to make sure you guys are using the best possible tools and really the most important information and from the leaders here in the state. So again, I'm going to turn it back to Andy. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. Now,
Andy, I'm going to jump in real quick. Hi, everyone. We seem to still be having some audio difficulties. If you can hear me, can you please type something into the control panel? I haven't heard from everyone that they can't hear, but some people. Oh, awesome. We got a lot of people who can hear us.
Great.
Awesome.
Great.
Okay. I'll try to reach out to those of you who said they couldn't hear, and I'm glad that all those great words from Tony and Dave were not lost. So thank you, everyone, and I am going to go back on mute.
All right, very good. Well, once again, thank you very much, Tony and David, for starting us off here. Let's continue moving forward with today's presentation. So what are we going to be doing over the next hour or so? We're going to take a quick look at a couple of friendly suggestions or reminders on things that we can do to maintain operations. So how can we make better of the current situation regarding COVID-19 and how we're not transporting students so much anymore, but we may be transporting meals. But what else can we do to keep things rolling forward? And I would like to share a couple of success stories regarding that very, very briefly before we move on to our discussion panel today. We've got an exciting panel set up for us today. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the knowledge that comes out of it. So without any further ado, let's go on to see what else we have to offer here. So maintaining operations, again, just a couple of friendly suggestions or reminders to have us in the mindset of thinking, what can I do to make better of the situation that we're in right now, take advantage of maybe a bit more time available to us to keep the operation moving and maybe even improve upon things a little bit. So maybe consider taking inventory of the technology that you have. You may have GPS vendors or routing software vendors out there. You've purchased some products or you've purchased on some extensions for additional functionality out there. And it's happened before where folks will purchase those things, and at the time that they make those purchases, they just don't have the time to implement fully. So this may be the time to take stock of what you have out there and maybe consider implementing some of those products or some of those features that maybe you just haven't had the time or the resources to take care of at an earlier point. Now, speaking of taking advantage of technology, we're doing so right now. This time here may give us more time to engage with e-learning, to go to webinars, to expand our field of knowledge, and maybe gain some additional certifications that make us better suited to serving our community at large and maintaining our operation. Now, also with maintaining, there's vehicle maintenance itself. Now, we may not be able to have boots on the ground technicians able to work on our vehicles at that time. They may be at home with the district being closed. but perhaps prior to us transporting students again, we may have the opportunity to make sure that all of our vehicles are back up to snuff and ready to go. We don't want our first day of pupil transportation returning to have 3 or 4 buses down because they need some maintenance done to them. So, let's try to make sure that we're ready to go when we're ready to transport students again. Now, another thing that you may want to take advantage of during this time is making sure that your map information is up to speed. Talking about routing software vendors out there, they rely upon mapped information. And sometimes the mapped information that's available in your routing software may not be completely up to date. There may be new housing developments, which means new streets and new addresses that are not represented in your routing software. This may be your opportunity to take stock of those newer locations and add them onto your maps, so you'll be able to take your buses in there and appropriately show the communities that you're servicing in those newer areas. This goes along with data integrity as well. A lot of you have student information systems that house your student data out there, and that student information system may be communicating with other systems you have out there, like routing software. Well, the initial setup of those student information system imports may not include all of the details you want. For example, relevant to our time here, maybe our student information system has the data on students that qualify for free and reduced lunches. And if that's never been included in what's being pushed to your routing software in the past, you may want to take stock and consider maybe we can get that information from the student information system into your routing software. It doesn't just need to be free and reduced lunches, though.
Andy, I'm sorry. I'm interrupting one more time. I'm not sure what's going on with GoToWebinar, but your slides have not advanced. We're not seeing your slides at all. Just the welcome slide from the beginning.
Okay. Let me see.
There we go.
Does that fix things? Okay, very good.
Yep. We're on
All right,
maintaining
very good.
operations. Is that where we should all be?
That's where we are. That's
you.
where we are. Perfect. Okay. So like I was saying with our student information systems, if we want to take advantage of more of the data that's in there, we want to be able to push that out to our routing software so we can take better advantage of that, especially when we're ready to transport students anew here. Of course, we're in the spring at this time, and if we haven't done so already, we may want to take some steps to prepare for next year, roll over our data, get ready to move on to our 2021 school year. And since we may be looking into how our trips are going to be operating for next year, we may have a little bit more time to take a look and see how well they're running. We may be able to consolidate runs or look better into efficiencies, whether we can cut down time or maybe even cut a trip out of operation altogether to save the time and energy it takes to keep those buses rolling out, and that can save of course the community, resources, money, things along those lines. Budgets may be looking pretty sparse next year, so we may be looking for ways to reduce costs, and also we may want to look into whether there are any purchases that we wish to make while our budgets are available this year, especially if we're considering that budgets may be less available to us next year. Now, speaking of things that are available to us, Transfinder is currently giving our community communication tool, StopFinder. It's available for free to anyone. So you don't need to be a Transfinder client in order to take advantage of StopFinder being available to you. If you reach out to us, we will be able to provide it to you. Now, StopFinder allows for you to send push notifications out through smart devices, so Android phones, iPhones, regarding changes to operation in real time. And this can help get information out in the places where people are looking at those screens all day, number one. And number two, it can also help control the flow of information, making sure that misinformation does not make its way out there. Now, this is all a part of us being fluid and being able to work with our current situation. I've been saying before, making better of where we are right now. I don't want to say making the best of the situation because, well, this is striking everybody really hard, but we can make better of where we are right now by taking advantage of the fact that times may be a little bit slower at this point rather than when things are operating normally, where we're transporting students. A couple of districts out there, even in New York State, are taking advantage of that time and taking advantage of the resources that they have available, particularly routing software. For example, Lions CSD out in the Finger Lakes area has used their routing software to create curb-to-curb service for meal delivery. And in addition to that, Hunter's Tannersville down in the Catskills has used routing software to create a parade run, basically a run that transports the staff and teachers from the district and transports them by the students' homes. So that way the teachers can continue to reach out and be a part of the community, still maintaining responsible social distancing, but still saying we are here, we still care, we still want to say hello to our students. And finally, we have in the capital region, we've got Schenectady City, which has set up community stops for meal delivery. And not only that, but Schenectady City has also adopted best practices for sanitation of the buses, especially during this time. And those best practices are available through the Transfinder website, through the best practices section. So we have that available for everybody out there to take advantage of. In all of these cases, we're not dealing with the standard transporting students. It's not business as usual, but we're still getting business done. So with that being said, I'd like to invite you out there, maybe not right this second, but maybe after this webinar, consider if you have a success story that you would like to share with the community. Now, this is not only for Transfinder to share. We are collecting stories, though, and sharing success around the country here, but if you share your success with us, we may be able to share your strategies and solutions for problems that other people are facing, and they may be able to take advantage of your knowledge and your expertise. So you're not only helping your community, but you're helping folks around the country. Now, with that being said, I'd like for us to pay some good attention over to our discussion panel. I'm going to hand the mic over to Rick DeRico there. Thank you very much, Rick, for hosting this discussion panel. And everybody, let's take advantage of the good knowledge out there.
All right, thanks so much, Andy. And I want to, first of all, are all our panelists on? And you want to show your cameras and unmute yourself. We'll get into this lively discussion. I'm really looking forward to it. I want to just first thank David, Christopher, and also NYAP for partnering with Transfinder on what I think is really this a very important endeavor. You know, front page news today, of course, is about the state budget and how school aid is going to be flat, and that's on the good side if it's flat, because they look at there might be some possible reductions, and that's going to be probably one of the issues we're going to be discussing today. I want to cut right to the chase, but one thing I want to say, we had a nice conversation yesterday with the panelists, and I want you to know that you might hear from one or all of our panelists say something like this: I don't have the answer to that, or I don't know that quite yet. And I want you to know that, to reassure you that that is not for lack of preparation for today's panel. It's actually the fact that this is a changing landscape. And so I think you should actually feel comforted in knowing that if they don't know it, nobody knows it. And so they're going to help us to make sure that we always keep our best practices site up to date. And through NYAP, you're going to be getting the latest information. But I just want to let you know, if you do hear that answer, that's because it's an ever-changing landscape. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists. Christina Coughlin, she's the Assistant Commissioner of the New York State Department of Education. Kathy Furneaux is the Executive Director of the Pupil Transportation Safety Institute. And Paul Overbaugh is the State Director of Pupil Transportation with the New York State Department of Education. And I've asked them all to just kind of quickly just kick things off by just giving us kind of a brief overview of what it is that you're seeing in your respective roles. And we'll just start with Christine first, and then work through Kathy, and then Paul, if you could talk a little bit about what you're hearing on the front lines. Christine, are you there? Okay, I'm going to move to Kathleen because I can see her, and we'll go to Paul, and then if Christine can get back on, we'll try to wrap it up with Christine. So Kathleen, thanks so much for participating.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Mostly what we're hearing on the front line at PTSI are people who are experiencing what I call compliance panic. You know, in the school transportation industry, the measure of whether or not you're doing a good job has always been, are you compliant or better? And so they're experiencing a situation where perhaps they cannot accomplish compliance right now. And it's causing them to have a lot of anxious moments about that. How will the agencies view that lack of compliance? Am I the only one that can't seem to get the testings done, the trainings done on time, that sort of thing? How will the agency view it? Are they extending deadlines? All of the, you know, millions of questions that they can come up with in terms of what do I do? And so at PTSI, we are sharing with them, my first advice to everyone is to take a breath. We're all in this together, and that the agencies know exactly what's happening. They don't have the answers right now, but they are certainly going to be accommodating and understanding of the situation you're in. And certainly, if you have a history of doing the right thing for the right reasons, a lapse because of the COVID-19 situation is certainly not going to go against you. You know, we're going, the SED and DMV and DOT and even PTSI, we are all working together behind the scenes to understand exactly what the challenges are and how we can best serve you to meet those challenges.
I think that even that is going to make people sigh a little bit of relief that there's some understanding that things are not normal. Paul?
Yes, can you hear me?
Paul?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You have to shake your head. Good.
There's a
So
little bit of an echo, but go ahead.
thank you so much for inviting us to this call. It is a very trying time for us as an agency. We are trying to advocate for our drivers, mothers, attendants, and the safety of our students. And what we are looking at and facing is a lot of uncertainty. We're getting lots of questions, lots of emails, and we're going to try to do our best to get through those questions and get back to you as soon as we have an answer. We know that this is a very fluid situation and things are changing rapidly. So we do appreciate your patience, but we're doing our best to assist you.
That's great. Christina, are you there? Okay, folks, I want to just apologize up front. We have had some serious technical difficulties, and I think, as you can imagine, everybody is doing video conferences right now, and so I think that that's probably part of the issue here. So I just want to apologize. We do have, as Julie mentioned earlier, the question format that you can type in some questions, and we're going to try to get some of those in as well. I have a list of questions that David shared that said these are the questions we're hearing. So we just want to jump right into it. And I'm just going to say, whoever can answer this, just jump in and answer it. And Christine, whenever you can get on, we'll make way to bring you back on. We definitely want to hear what you have to say. So for starters, will transportation aid flow to school districts that have paid their transportation contractors during the shutdown? Paul, that's probably a question for you.
Yeah, we have received that question many times, and we are working through that. We have run that up to our administration, and our administration is working on that currently to get an answer. And we are trying to look at, all options and waiting upon the guidance from our governor and our elected officials.
Okay. Another question we've gotten is that the US DOT has given a waiver for physicals, the due dates, which is through June 30th. And the question was whether SED would waive physicals that might be due during the shutdown as well.
Well, since our physicals are in regulation, we have the ability to adjust those regulations within reason. And of course, under these dire circumstances, you do have 13 months, but if you are overdue, we would definitely understand that, and you would just note that on your physical form in your file that would state that, the physical was late due to the COVID-19 virus.
Actually, Paul, that kind of brings up a point that we talked about a little bit yesterday, the difference between a regulation and a statute. So can you kind of go over that? And that's why some of these things that you have control over, and then there are some things that you don't.
If you hang on a second, I think I have Christina on the phone. She might be able to weigh in.
Okay.
Christina, can you weigh in on that between the statute and the regulation? Christina, can you hear me?
Okay, well.
All right, I guess that's not going to work. We're going to try again. Here she is. Next to your patients, folks.
Okay.
Christina, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Christina.
The governor's executive orders are, have given us somewhat.
Oh, I'm sorry, we can't really hear her.
In our regulations. And with respect to items that are in state law, those ones, the governor's orders are, as the issues are raised by the various state agencies that are working on this, the governor's orders are providing the flexibility we need.
Okay, so what I'm going to, Paul, you want to rephrase that? I think, unfortunately, we can't hear her. Could you just kind of rephrase that for us?
Yeah, I'm sorry, they're not hearing you, Christina. From my phone, I'm hearing you loud and clear. So what she's saying is that if it's in statute, then we have to bring it to the governor, and through an executive order of the governor, we can waive the statute. But if it's a regulation, we have authority to adjust those regulations, but not the statutes, because the statutes are in the law, the education law, which is controlled by the governor.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is another question from somebody that I posted earlier. How should I proceed with the second mandated refresher if I haven't already conducted the refresher with my drivers, my attendants, and my monitors?
Yes, with your mandated refresher, if you have not conducted that because of the COVID-19 shutdown, what we are recommending is that you postpone it until schools are in session and your buildings are open. And then, as soon as possible, schedule that within the first week or two back and have that requirement met. And then note that on the file for their sign-in that they attended the refresher, and note that it was late because of COVID-19.
Okay. I have a basic course scheduled during the shutdown. Can I proceed with the basic course if I have less than 10 people in the class?
I would say no. We do not want to risk the health of our drivers, monitors, and attendants for that basic course. So therefore, we would ask you to postpone that course. And I believe, Kathy, if you can chime in on that as well.
Yeah, people that have called our office sit with that same question. We've advised them to postpone until after school's open. Simply modify your MPO, get it back to us with the new schedule, new dates, not a problem. And then you just pick up the schedule, modify your MPO accordingly. And then we'll change the posting on our website, and then you take care of that after schools are open. It's a very smooth transition. You just simply modify your MPO and resubmit.
Great, thank you so much. And you know what, I hope that you guys can hear this, and when you're watching this, that you just see the desire to help you. So I feel it. When we talked yesterday, it was just a sense of how can we work with you. Julie, are you on the line? You might have some questions. I have still a long list of questions, but you might have one I want to bring to the top from the folks who are watching right now.
Rick, I am on the line. Hello. There are a lot of questions, but if you still have some from your list, you can keep going with that.
Okay, sounds good. So what is the plan for a PDS delivery for school bus driver instructors?
So the professional development seminar is what we have worked with PTSI on, and we have a great curriculum that we've planned for the next school year. And the purpose of the PDS is to teach our SBDIs some instruction techniques as well as prep them to teach the core topics for the next school year. So in light of our circumstance, we need to move to a telecommunication form and model for this purpose and this year only. I am an avid believer in face-to-face communication and presenting skills, as you know, and therefore this is under dire circumstances that we are going to the telecommunication method to complete our professional development seminar. So what will happen is that as soon as we are able to get PTSI staff back into work after the clearance and the lifting of the working from home, what we're going to do is we're going to set that up so where you would sign on to the PTSI website and you would register and partake of that, a PDS seminar, where we will have checks and balances to make sure that you're actually attending the PDS, and therefore you would also have to do an additional homework assignment because it's going to be a lot shorter than the regular day, and you will not be presenting this year. Anything else, Kathy?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. The pre-session assignment is going to be expanded a little, and so you will complete the pre-session assignment, and then the verification document that you get when you complete the online PDS, the two of those things are then mailed to our office. They'll be checked to make sure that it's all valid, and then the PDS manual and your new SBDI card or MI card will be shipped immediately. So I think that, you know, in terms of that, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to continue to your certification as SBDIs and MIs, but also to kind of make that transition as smooth as possible.
Great.
Rick, can I jump in with a question?
Yes, please, please.
All right. And a question from Jim is, how about DOT inspections that will expire during the shutdown?
They would have to contact the Department of Transportation for that answer.
And actually, I wanted to say, in a few, Paul, you had recommended down the road, so we may have DMV and DOT officials in future webinars. So that's a great question. So and then Julie, I'll come back to you in a second. Thank you so much for that. Will the State Education Department consider distance learning as a future option to deliver in the delivery of the PDS and refreshers for drivers and attendance monitors? Is this where we're headed?
We will consider it, but as we have an emphasis now upon, you know, in-person presenting, we think that's important. I think it's very difficult to speak to the audience that I can't see, because I'm not being able to read the audience to understand if they're actually receiving and understanding what I'm trying to communicate, or if I need to present it in a different way so that I can connect with my audience. So with these reservations, you know, we're going to consider it and use it if need be. But for now, we're going to just continue our standard operation coming next year.
Great, great. Let's see here. Julie, you got another question from the audience. While you're looking, I got another one. How should we comply with the school bus emergency drill requirements?
Yes, that is very similar to other questions in that we're asking you to postpone them until schools are back in session. And then within that first week back, conduct your bus safety drill and just document again on that form that's getting signed off by a supervisor of some kind that it was late due to the COVID-19 shutdown.
The key is, again, to continue to communicate that.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like I've heard on the news lately about, you know, if you're having a hard time paying your bills, don't just, you know, hide the bills or not open the bills, but communicate, maybe I was furloughed or whatever, to communicate, not to just, bury your head in the sand. Kathleen, anything you want to add to any of what we've talked about so far?
Well, not necessarily exactly what we've talked about so far, but another thing that we're seeing, Rick, a lot is we're getting questions about 19A recertification refreshers and courses, and PTSI is one of the primary providers of those two courses for the 19A program, which, as we all know, is a DMV program. And so I can tell you that what we're doing is we are postponing all of our scheduled courses, and we're moving 30 to 45, and in some cases 60 days in advance, and we're rescheduling those. And what we will be doing is everyone that is currently registered for a refresher or a course, when we schedule out and reschedule, we're just transferring all of those tuitions and all of the registration names to the rescheduled event. And then, so that no one loses their place in line, so to speak. And then if that time and date doesn't work for them, then we'll work out those challenges as we move forward. But another issue that we're thinking about, and at PTSI we'll be meeting about tomorrow, is that how can we better serve people whose 19A certifications are expiring during this time? And now, they may get shut out over the next 2 or 3 months, or perhaps even longer. And so we're going to be meeting tomorrow, myself and my staff, to look for ways that we can facilitate making sure that everyone whose certification is expired has a chance to get recertified in a timely manner. So at PTSI, we're looking at all of that in terms of our certification courses to make sure that we keep people compliant to the degree possible and do everything we can to serve them.
Super. All right. I'm looking at some, you know what? I'm just going to.
Can I jump in with one?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So the question is, should districts be paying providers during the shutdown? How do we address per pupil decimal if schools do not open? If school is not open, could this be delayed a year?
That is a very good question that I do not have the answer for. We will have to check with our state aid office at SAD and find out what their guidance would be in relation to that.
Okay. Let's see, what kinds of things, this is kind of like forward-looking kind of question, what kinds of things should transportation providers be thinking about for the future to be prepared for the kinds of issues going forward, like online learning, Wi-Fi on buses, cleaning, disinfecting of buses, so it's forward-looking here.
So in relation to cleaning, you're going to follow your manufacturer's specifications. I've seen some manufacturers provide instructions as to how to clean. I've also contacted some other distributors to find out what cleaning would be best recommended. And, they have assured me that, cleaning a school bus with ammonium chloride, what's in your standard, hand wipes, but not bleach, is what would be okay and not validate or would not violate, your warranty on the bus. So that was very important. I've also reached out to car manufacturers and the car seat manufacturers, that is, and because many of our buses have car seats and some of us have integrated car seats, and they only recommend following their manufacturer's instructions, which is basically a mild soap detergent with warm water to clean the harnesses and the car seats.
Okay. A question from one of the attendees was, if a driver who has become non-compliant and dropped from the driver roster, can they drive a school bus during that time?
Again, that's a 19A question. And from my knowledge of 19A, I would say no, they cannot drive until they're added onto a roster.
Okay.
Nothing?
Well, what we've been advising people is that perhaps they should consider not dropping the driver right now, because the minute school's open, if you've got 20 drivers that have been dropped, then you're down 20 drivers. Understanding that 19A and DMV are going to be making some sort of accommodation during this time because we're all facing these same compliance issues. We've been advising them not to do the drop and to just note the file. And as soon as schools open, get your drivers compliant just as soon as you can, as Paul had said about SED within, the first couple of weeks. Now, I am also very quick to tell them I am not DMV. I am not 19A, but the guidance that we got from 19A is a little vague. And I think that was intentional to allow people to be able to do what they could to fit their operations, understanding that every operation is different. I think that if you have a history of doing the right thing and you continue to do the right thing for the right reason and you demonstrate that effort, that you're going to be all right. But I'm concerned about dropping drivers and then school starts and now you don't have them on the roster. So aside from that guidance that we got from 19A, I would say you need to contact the DMV, specifically ask that question. Until then, I think we just have to use our own logic and kind of figure it out and come up with some reasonable ways to handle that.
Hey, Rick, this is Dave.
I'm sorry.
This is Dave. Can I add to that?
Sure, please.
Shortly after we received that notification from DMV, NIAP did send a letter to the commissioner of DMV asking for them to pursue an executive order with the governor to waive 19A requirements until schools are open, because there were a lot of people who were very concerned about the vagueness of that message. So we're waiting to hear on that. Hopefully we'll hear soon. But it is a big concern of people, and it's understandable because we don't know what to do. That's a perfect example of a law that would have to be waived by the executive, and DMV could only issue what they could issue. We appreciate they went as far as they did, but it takes the governor to issue that executive order on the 19A law.
Very good. By the way, has anybody heard about when school might reopen? That was one of the questions we got today.
No, I have not heard. I just know what the governor said is that, he's going to reassess after these 2 weeks or towards the end of these 2 weeks and make another decision.
Okay. If transportation does not open until summer or September, this is another question from one of our attendees, do we certify that we are in compliance? It said that the affidavit is due before July 1st, at least pre-virus.
Again, that is the 19A question, which you would have to contact the bus driver unit for clarification.
Okay. Julie, any questions that stand out for you?
Yeah, so this is this is about 19A, but I think it also could be some creative thinking within a group. It says DMV has recommended we try to keep current with our 19A. Most of my upcoming 19A tests are defensive driving that requires passengers. Any thoughts, as we don't currently have passengers?
No.
Well,
sorry,
that's okay. I didn't know if that, not being an expert on 19A, obviously I can't answer that. Could other bus drivers be the passengers for that sort of training?
Well, the advice I would have is that postponing and doing a test, late is different than modifying the test. And so you need to be careful about modifying the test itself, because then it's not the test. And so you might do that and put other drivers on the bus and it not be accepted as the endorsed test. So I think there's a big difference between postponing a test and doing it late versus changing the test. And I think that you need to be very, very careful about potentially changing the test.
Right.
I agree.
So another question from an attendee said, what are districts obligated to do with state funds earmarked for transportation? The question was, if they do not pay contractors, you know, the 180-day obligation? How does that fit in to the equation?
We have sent that across the street for basically an answer. We've sent that question up and over, and we are waiting for them and providing as much information as they request of us to help them make that decision and do the right thing.
Great. I want to turn to Tony Civitella for a second. Tony, you have a question that that you read from an attendee that you wanted to share with us.
Great. Listen, there's a lot of questions, actually a lot of statements, and I think some statements is like document everything. There's this document, that way someone can't say you didn't know, right? I mean, there's a lot of questions, and I feel like it's always safe just to document everything you're doing, take pictures. I mean, at that point, you at least have some supporting documents. To say, well, I didn't know, that might not be a good way to get out of your questions. But it's the McKinney-Vento one, right? It's a good question about, it's going to be escalating. Of course, all the recent events, there's going to be a lot of kids that's going to fall in the McKinney-Vento. Are these districts going to meet the demand when there's no funding at all available? So I think it's a good one right there.
Very good. Another question that David shared prior to this webinar was that other state agencies have scheduled audits during the school shutdown. Is the State Education Department also considering audits at this time?
We have postponed all of our file reviews at this time. You know, our vendor who does them is PTSI, and they're heeding the governor's advice to work from home and to reduce, you know, contact with other individuals. And since most school districts are closed, to call in a transportation director to review the files puts people at harm. So we thought it was best to postpone those file reviews until schools are open and everything is back to the new normal.
Okay. Could someone explain the extension for non-public transportation applications?
The extension for non-public transportation is that initially the request for transportation to non-public schools would be due by April 1st. There has been a decision to extend that to April 15th. So you have until April 15th to have parents request transportation to non-public schools for next year. And I believe that they are, you know, using that, the urgency of that to prepare for budgets, which is another unknown at this time.
Very good. One thing I asked, just as a former reporter and wanted to kind of give people a sense of your own, you know, lifestyle. I was just wondering, how has life changed for you? You know, Transfinder, we all went remote on March 13th. I was just wondering what life has been like for you. What kind of, you know, change of path, your daily habits?
Kathy?
Well, the commute is much shorter. I can tell you that. Working from home normally is something that I do when I need to stay completely focused and I need to not have interruptions and I can work. And I can tell you, after, you know, a week of working from home, I would welcome an interruption or two. You know, I think that we've learned to communicate better. At PTSI, I know I've often been heard to say the monkey on my back as an executive director from day one has been communication with my staff. But I can tell you now that we are all remote, we're communicating via email very fluidly. We're having remote, you know, electronic staff meetings minimally once a week. We're discussing and sharing and getting feedback. And I think that if anything, our communication has improved. And yeah, I get it. We were forced into it, but I think it's one of the benefits, the unexpected benefits. I think that it also has given me personally time to reflect a little bit on, you know, society and society's value system. And, you know, as someone who's nearing retirement myself, It really, this whole crisis has, for me personally, has put my life in very clear perspective. And I think that that's happening to a lot of people around the country. And I'm thinking that I share our own governor's opinion that when we get to the other side of this, I am very hopeful that we'll be better people.
That is outstanding. That's great. Yeah, Tony said something the other day to the staff that even though we're practicing social distancing, in many ways, we're closer than we've ever been. Paul, I have Christina on the other line, but Paul will go with you, and then I'll turn it over to Christina. I want to hear from her.
Sure. Life is a little different now. Being an essential staff, if you will, I'm still continuing in the office from time to time during the week. I'm at home a couple of days or 1 or 2 days, but I'm also working at the Operations Emergency Management Center 3 days a week. So I'm assisting there in that capacity on behalf of SED and trying to advocate as much as I can for school bus safety. When some schools were closed before the decision was made to close all schools, we were tracking that and providing that information to the officials, as well as whatever other questions they had in relation to how we could use school buses and what we could be of assistance from our industry. So life is a little different, and I believe that we are a lot more appreciative of the people in our lives during this time because nobody knows the future. So it really is important for us to maybe take this time to reflect on those people that are so important to us, and not only our local families, our home families, but our work families. We are a work community, and we need to be caring individuals for one another and communicate as much as possible while keeping that social distancing.
Very good. Christine, before you get to that question, I know you've been on the line and you've been listening, so it's definitely not last but not least. It's definitely last but not least with you. So just give me your thoughts on, what you've heard and any things that maybe you want to clarify or take a little further than what we've heard so far.
Well, there was a little stretch in the middle when I wasn't part of it, so I may have missed something that I could speak to. I think I've got to tell you that I've been very impressed with the Pupil Transportation community and its thoughtfulness about how to solve all these complicated operations problems that have cropped up in the last little while, and how to work with the vendors that are part of our world and all that. So it's been very inspiring to me. And in terms of what my role has been, I'm sort of the conduit between the experts, Paul and the folks that are listening to this, that are part of the panel, and then that are listening to this call, as those questions arise, to try to figure out how it works within the sort of new environment that we're in, and where we don't have an answer, where something requires a statutory change, or we need to kind of, forgive a reg under the authority that we have to do so, sort of getting that done and getting that cleared. So I've to a certain extent felt like a little bit of a runner of questions and answers back and forth, and communicating with policymakers both within the state education department and legislative staff and the like, as they've been working on statutory issues. So, and it's been looking at what the world has been like for my colleagues at state ed. There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of people realizing how in many ways our system was completely designed top to bottom, assuming we'd all be in one, children would all be in one place as they're doing their learning, or young adults would be in one place as they're practicing their skills for a new career, or whatever the case may be. And folks at state ed have been working really hard to figure out how to recognize the present environment and say, okay, that's not going to work now, but we can do this. You can see it in the digital education movement. You can see it in career and technical education, all kinds of things. And I expect we'll continue to do so as it stretches out. So
that's great.
I don't know any questions that people had for me, but it's been, I will say, as my fellow panelists have just said, it's been a very collaborative time in terms of folks trying to solve problems together, and that's a really good thing.
So one of the things that I will probably do is actually just send people to your respective websites too for the latest information. I'm assuming that those are updated regularly. We want to be a clearinghouse for all that information. And I have a feeling we're going to have you guys back again because this is, again, a changing landscape, and you might have some more directives after maybe the dust has settled a little bit more in the next couple of weeks. Any last takeaways before I close this out from any three of you?
Well, I think one takeaway is that as I sat in on one of the calls this morning, there is great appreciation from the leadership in our state to those people that are going above and beyond. And as I reflect upon the Pupil Transportation community, there is great warriors in our industry that are going forth and protecting children and providing food and educational assistance through the computers and different things that schools are doing, and how they're working together and collaborating to really help this whole environment come together and work through this situation. We've never been here before.
Right.
And many times I've been thinking about this. Is like, when Europe was in the midst of a war, they closed the schools and they had life shut down for sure. And we never have experienced that before. Now we're in this situation, and it's impacting all of us in very difficult ways. And this is where we need to come together. And I am very appreciative to be a part of the Pupil Transportation community and work with such great professionals. It's an honor for me. So I thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to add that, all of us at PTSI, we get it. We understand what you're going through. We're doing everything we can. We're assessing all of our processes and how we do things and when we schedule and how to schedule so that we can serve you better, understanding the challenges that you're facing. But I personally would just say, sit back, take a breath, and know that all of us here on this webinar today and even more, we're all working together to make sure that we can get you to the other side of this unscathed. But at the same time, we need to maintain the safety of children going down the road, no pun intended, and that's the goal. And it's still the goal. It's always been the goal, and it will always be the goal.
Excellent. Tony.
Listen, I think we could say that a lot of us are, we're prepared. I think we went through a lot of different things. There's a different things between prepared. Sometimes it can be physically prepared, but mentally prepared is a tough one. And I think, as you look at the southern part of New York State, I think a lot of people could say we're prepared, but mentally, how could we be mentally prepared on what's going on? And I tell you, there's a difference between technology and having everything ready. We're a technology company, but mentally prepared, it's something that, that's not something that Transfinder does. But we see you guys, you overcome whatever. Like right now, I have Christine on my cell phone. She's talking through my computer. Listen, we're a technology company, and you guys have your own technology, and it's working. But mentally, it's a whole other thing. How do you do that? And so this is where we're fortunate that we're in technology, and we're going to do our part, of course, in technology, because we know you're doing your part, and that's very hard. There's a difference between what we do on a daily basis. We're in our house, and we're all working from home. But you guys are still have to deal with the emotional piece. And I got to tell you, I want to thank you for your service, of course. So guys, listen, I'm looking at the questions. This is probably the most attended webinar we ever had in the company's history. There are so many questions. I actually feel guilty that we didn't answer these things. So I know we're going to have a way to get back to everybody, because we did not answer all the questions. So I feel a little bit, I respect
I don't want you to feel guilty, but I do think that there's a lot of questions there, and everybody stayed on, and so we will find a way to get those answers. And again, this is a developing story. Yeah. David, any closing comments before I close this out?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. I guess my first thought as I listen, what the transportation folks out there are doing does not surprise me. I mean, the day this all went down, we had people calling in, figuring out how to disinfect buses, how to figure out meal routes, using their software to plot out routes. I mean, everybody gets right after it in this business, and they always have. I remember we had hurricanes terrible snowstorm. Certainly this is much worse. But transportation people step up and they make it happen. And I see that happening right now all over the state of New York. I was on a webinar with the Western New York folks the other day, and they're telling me what they're doing out there, and it's like just matter of fact business. And I know the Long Island folks are, they're hunkered down there because they're in the throes of it. But it's the same thing. They do what needs to be done, and we're going to get through this, no question. I have total faith in that. I do want to just throw a little bit out there about the state budget. I did send out a budget update last night, which our representative updated us last evening. It looks like we're going to get a budget. It looks like state transportation aid is going to get a slight increase, which is a good thing given the environment we're in. I have to tell you, I was awake at night worrying that we were going to lose a lot of state aid this year. That, if you remember, the governor proposed a cap on state aid. That's not going to happen. So hopefully we're in good shape, in terms of our transportation aid. They haven't voted on it yet, so certainly, anything can happen, but that was encouraging. So I appreciate all you folks who went out and spoke to your legislators and pushed the issue. So thank you for that. So Tony, thank you for doing this. This is a great thing you're doing, and hopefully we can keep it going. Thank you to all the attendees who signed on to listen. And the attendee numbers, what do we have, 300, something like that? Doesn't surprise me. That's New York. When you do these things, they step up. So thank you all attendees for signing on, and thank you, Tony, for doing this.
Well, thank you so much, David. I want to thank NYAP for making this available. And we said part 1 on purpose because that means that there has to be a part 2. So and hopefully many more than that. I want to thank the panelists. You guys were phenomenal, and thank you for sticking with us. For the people who attended, we had very few people drop off. You stayed to the very end. We are trying to, and we will answer all your questions. Finally, if you have any stories, if you could send them to us, we would love to have them. And again, it really doesn't matter what system you're using. If you're using no system, anything that you can share a best practice, we want to get it out there so people can learn from you. The best practices is you. It's your stories. So that's at my story at transfinder.com. And the best practices page is also anchored on the transfinder.com website. So thank you again very much for everybody participating, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.